Paleo Runner podcast is devoted to finding better ways to live, run, train, and eat. I'm your host, Aaron Olson. You can find more information by going to paleorunner.org. If you enjoy the show, please go to iTunes and leave a review. Search for Paleo Runner in iTunes and click ratings and reviews. You can also follow me on facebook.com/runpaleo or on Twitter @runpaleo. I wanted to take a minute to let you know about a product I've been using called 3Fuel. 3Fuel is a sports drink that gives you fat, protein, and carbohydrates to use as a fuel source. Unlike sugary sports drinks, 3Fuel gets absorbed slowly into your bloodstream to give you sustained energy throughout your workout. If you'd like to give it a try, you can get 10% off by using the coupon code 3FOLSON. Go to paleorunner.org and click 3Fuel at the top of the page. If you're listening through the podcast app on iPhone, click the link displayed on the app right now. My guest today is Christopher Hague. Chris is an accomplished triathlete who follows a low-carb, high-fat diet. You can follow his blog and his racing at triathlonbuddha.blogspot.com. Chris, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks very much, Aaron.
Yeah, so Chris, tell me a little bit about your background. How did you ever get interested in endurance sports in the first place?
Well, I first got into endurance sports back in high school. I went for the cross country team, and went out, and on the first day, went out, and the coach said, run the course, don't do anything serious, and I went out and I stuck with the lead pack, and I've been running ever since. So I ran high school cross country and track all throughout high school, and then at the end of high school started getting into triathlon. And originally didn't want to run college, but like in high school, went out the first day, stuck with the lead pack, and the coach said, you're on the team. And so triathlon kind of took a back seat in college. I went cross country and track all the way through. I tried to do both in college, training for triathlon in the morning and then running in the afternoon, double practices, 6 days a week, just took a toll on my body. And the coach said, Chris, you got to make a decision. So just stuck with running throughout college, both cross country and then the 5K, 10K and track. And then right after college ended, went back to triathlon and focusing more on the longer distances. Was never really a speed guy. My coach likes to say, there's not a single fast twitch muscle in my body. So definitely I like the longer events. If you're going to train 20 to 25 hours a week, might as well spend your race, the majority of your day out there. And so have been focusing on the 70.3s for the past couple years, and I'm finally bumping up to the full distance next year.
Okay. So for our listeners who are wondering, what kind of times are you running in college and then getting into triathlon?
In college, I did in cross country for the 8K. I did a 25:30 on a fast course.
Okay.
And then did a 15:15 for the 5K on the track, and then a 32 flat for the 10K. So not incredibly fast times. But then once I got into the half marathons and the half distance for triathlons, for the half marathon, my PR is a 1:14. And I did that at the Rock and Roll DC a couple of years ago, and then did a 1:16 on a half Ironman in Providence 2 years ago.
Cool. So what kind of got you into the triathlon as you started to move out of college?
I was a little burnt. I realized my body couldn't take the 100-mile weeks anymore. My body was just kind of breaking down from all that running, and I wanted a little bit more variety. And I also, like most runners who move on to triathlon, wanted a bit more of a challenge. I like the variety that triathlon provided with every single day is a different workout, whether it's on the bike or back on the track or in the pool. So I like that variety, and it just provided a new challenge. And I still love running. That's my favorite part of all three sports. But having that variety of being able to have days off from running and still be able to bike and swim is enjoyable.
So Chris, one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on the show is because I had seen you comment on one of my blog posts about how you also followed a high-fat, lower-carb type of diet and kind of how that's been working out for you. Tell the listeners and the audience what you've been doing in the past few months with the higher-fat diet.
I first started just as a preface, I had an eating disorder all throughout high school and college. So I was very much buying into the high carb, very low fat, fat phobic diet. So bowl of cereal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, snacks, and I was always hungry every 2 hours. And then I started to get into, and I was also perpetually injured. I was battling with depression, which kept on going. going. I was always hungry, obsessed about food, and it was just not the healthiest thing. So after meeting with the nutritionist who encouraged me to eat more fat, I started to change my diet and eat more fat. And then I switched more to, the 50 carb, 25 fat, 25 protein. And then I started to listen to people like Vinny Tortorich and Ben Greenfield and the Fit Fat Fast podcast with John Smith, and researched high fat diets a bit more, and saw, having a high fat diet, reduces injury but doesn't reduce performance. You're satiated, so you can, go out for a long ride on 40 calories, or half a scoop of UCAN and be fine. And that really started to appeal to me. So this past year, I started to tip my macronutrients more to a high-fat diet. Didn't really tweak too much during this past season, but then once my season ended this year, decided, why not try it out? What's the worst that could happen? So went in September, went pretty much on a 50% fat, 20 to 25% carb, and then a 25 to 30% protein diet. And it has been fantastic. I've noticed as a teacher, all my kids are getting sick, my coworkers are getting sick, but for some reason, and I think it's because of the diet, I'm not getting sick. I'm able to go out for a 4-hour ride, hold the same power numbers that I was during the season when I was, chomping down a bar 200 to 300 calories an hour, and only be able to use 40 calories. I went for a ride last Saturday had a fat shake beforehand, and then just had 40 calories of UCAN in a water bottle and was perfectly fine for 4 hours, which it's amazing. Considering I was using, for a 4-hour ride before, I was using 1,000 calories.
Wow.
My recovery is improved. I can do a workout in the morning and then be recovered by the afternoon. And I think that's partially just because, as I read in Finney and Bullock's book, the fat's just a cleaner burning fuel. You don't have the byproducts of carbohydrates that prevents the inflammation that results from eating carbohydrates and sugar that results. So going with more for fat for recovery and fat as fuel, you don't have those byproducts of that stress on your body. So lack of recovering better, sleeping better, and overall, I'm not craving food anymore. For the first time in my life, I'm not obsessed about food. And I've always felt like, pretty much throughout college and high school, I felt like I was on the brink of depression always. And I think that had to do partially with carbohydrates. And I think it was because sugar's a drug. It changes the way your brain chemistry works. And I think that had something to do with, my constant in and out of depression, and switching to a high fat diet. I think with burning ketones, it's like happy drugs in your brain, but natural. So I'm not a scientist, I'm not a full on doctor, but from what I read, this coincides with the high fat, low carb diet. And when I say low carb, I don't mean I'm not Atkins. I don't do under 50 grams of carbohydrate. I usually have about 150 grams on average carbs a day, 150 grams, and then with about 75 grams of net carbs, mostly so most of my carbs are pretty much from vegetables.
Okay.
Leafy greens, broccoli, those are my spinach, those are my 2 carbs. So I eat a lot of vegetables.
So explain what you mean by net carbs there, so people can understand.
Net carbs is, you have total carbs and net carbs, and total carbs is just all the carbs you eat, and the net carbs is your total carbs minus your dietary fiber intake.
Okay, interesting.
Net carbs are the total amount of fluctuation, the carbs that actually are digested by your body and affect your blood sugar significantly. Fiber, your body doesn't process fiber as well. It still uses it as absorbs the nutrients, but it doesn't affect your blood sugar as much as something like sugar.
Right. Interesting. So you made this transition from being pretty much fat phobic, super concerned about your weight all the time. When did you get over that? Just since this past year, you've been adding more fat in your diet, and you started feeling better about yourself and your body image, or has this been a long struggle for you? Or how long has it taken to get over that?
It's taken me about 10 years to get in the stage of recovery where I'm finally comfortable with my body image. And it really, good feelings about my self-confidence, my good feelings about my body, and my acceptance of my body really started to develop this past year. Yeah, and that coincided with the high-fat diet. Whether it's, correlation is not causation, but at the same time, I think having a higher fat diet and being more comfortable with eating fats and eating more naturally has helped.
So you're saying that on your rides, you're only taking in 40 calories total for a whole 4-hour ride. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Wow.
I do have a big breakfast beforehand. Have my typical pre-ride fat shake is 1 full avocado, pumpkin, so about 6 ounces of pumpkin, about 2 scoops of vegan protein powder, and I use Sun Warrior or Jarrows. And in addition to that, I might add, depending on how I feel and how long the ride is. If it's a short ride, like 2 hours, I will skip if it's over 2 hours, excuse me. If it's over 2 hours, I will add in a can of coconut milk, light coconut milk from Trader Joe's, and mix that all up. And total calories for that's about, I calculated it, it's between 550 and 600. So I have that about hour and a half beforehand, and then have 2 water bottles and 1 little flask of half a scoop of UCAN, and that's all I need. And I feel my power numbers are good. I don't really sip on that until the 2-hour mark, the 3-hour mark, and that's just enough to get me through the rest of the ride. And I'm holding a pretty good clip. I'm doing about 3.5, 3.8 watts per kilogram for my average power, and that feels easy. Keeping my heart rate low. But at the same time, I finished the ride and I feel like I could go out for a run.
Awesome. That's so cool to hear. So how has the diet affected your weight? Have you gained weight? Have you lost weight? What's that like?
Like you, I've actually gained weight, but my body composition has remained the same. I've remained at 5% body fat, but have put on 10 pounds of lean muscle since last year.
Really? Okay.
So my body fat percentage has remained the same, but my muscle mass has increased, which is great.
Is that going to affect your speed on the bike at all if you're putting on muscle mass?
Yeah, it's improved my speed on the bike.
Okay.
And also my energy levels on the bike. I'm able to hold a higher watts per kilogram and a higher speed or power output without tiring as quickly.
That's awesome. Okay. How about for the run?
For the run, my speeds have decreased a little bit. I was able to, my race pace was at least for the half iron, it's about 5:50. And that's gone to more like 6 minutes. I'm not sure if that is because I'm able to push harder on the bike, which is, pushing my half time, making my half marathon time slower, or it's because of the extra weight. Not exactly sure.
And so
I haven't done an open road race yet. I haven't done an open road race since last year, actually, since last Thanksgiving. So I haven't been able to, really test out whether my half time has decreased because of the extra weight.
Okay. Yeah, Chris, you actually just wrote a great blog post on your blog, triathlonbuddha.blogspot.com, about racing weight and how it sounds like you still kind of obsessively check it, but it sounds like it's probably more in a healthy way now. And one of the things you can point out is that how you're feeling mentally has a big effect on performance. It's not just your weight. And over the years, as your weight has fluctuated with your eating disorder, have you noticed any correlation between racing times and your muscle mass or your weight?
I think psychologically, it used to be, if I stepped on the scale in my race, if I stepped on the scale the morning of the race, and I was so obsessive about my weight that I would bring my scale wherever I went. So I would be able to weigh myself race morning. That's how bad it was. And so if my weight was not where I wanted it to be the morning of the race, I don't think it would get into my head, and I would feel, if I was overweight, if I gained weight leading up to a race, I would say to myself, oh, it's not going to be that great of a race, which affected, I think, my performance. Right. Or if I stepped on the scale and it was light, halfway, if I started to fade, I would go, oh damn, I'm too light. So I really let my weight dictate my performance. But now even though it's more of a habit checking my weight, and as I said in the blog, I make it a rule, this is not going to affect me. I step on the scale, and if I see a high number, I go, oh, that's interesting. And then, I go out for my ride, I go out for my training ride, and I don't really let it affect me, but I was like, oh, a higher weight, my times aren't really affected. I'm still able to do a 5:45 mile or a 5:30 mile tempo mile at this higher weight or at this lower weight. So I do it more of a habit now, but it's not affecting the way I see my performance or let it dictate how I perform. So as my weight, switching over to the high fat diet has made me less concerned about my weight and more concerned about how I'm mentally approaching a race.
Yeah. So, Chris, give me an idea of what kind of foods you're actually eating on a day-to-day basis, because I think one of the things about going to a higher fat diet is you can have a lot more nutrient-dense foods. I mean, things like butter, coconut oil, olive oil, and just having the freedom to kind of consume those foods ad libitum. What kind of foods are you eating?
I would say I'm about 90% plant-based. I'm not a full-on vegetarian, but I'm about 90% plant-based. I used to be a vegetarian, and that just wreaked havoc on my hormones. And that's another thing that the high-fat diet's changed is it's increased my testosterone levels. My thyroid function's a lot healthier, as is just my overall adrenal health. But my everyday foods, I pretty much eat almost the same thing every day. I don't get tired of the same foods.
Okay.
And so every morning, usually I have, similar to my pre-long ride work shake, I have one whole avocado, some plant-based protein powder, a little bit of almond milk, some chia seeds, and blend that up into kind of like a pudding consistency. Have that for breakfast with some coffee. Mid-morning, because I usually work out in the morning, if I do work out in the morning, I usually have about a tablespoon of coconut butter before I work out, along with some coffee. Work out for about an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. This is during the week. And then have my avocado pudding. And then about, I would say 4 hours later, I kind of get a little hungry again, so I have a handful of almonds. And then for lunch, I usually have a large salad with spinach, sprouts, hard-boiled eggs, and some veggies chopped up with some homemade olive oil salad dressing. What I do is I have a little bit of a tomato paste, olive oil, Bragg's amino acid, and whirl that up together, and that makes it awesome salad dressing. But 3 hard-boiled eggs and the large salad, and then if I'm working out in the afternoon as well, I might have a small snack before I work out, or just go into the workout straight on. If depending on the intensity, might have some UCAN beforehand. Or if I'm not working out in the afternoon, then just go all the way to dinner completely satiated. And then for dinner, I usually have roasted kale with nutritional yeast, salsa, and then 2 cans of sardines.
Awesome. Wow. That sounds pretty good. And you don't get sick of that on a day-to-day basis?
Not really. I kind of like, I like the consistency. And the taste. I mix up the herbs and the seasoning, or depending what's on season, what's on sale at the store. Sometimes, some steamed broccoli with the roasted kale, some cauliflower, some carrots. It all depends on the season or how I'm feeling. But that's the typical basis, the typical foundation of my diet.
And Chris, it sounds like you, like a lot of runners and triathletes, sounds like you're pretty obsessive about checking different body measurements and things like that. You said that your testosterone actually went up and your thyroid function is doing well. So give me an idea, how do you check that? And you also said you mentioned your body fat. Do you check that on a daily basis?
Yeah, I'm definitely obsessive. But I like to nerd out on all the data and see how my body's functioning. It might be a byproduct of the eating disorder, but now it's kind of treating my body instead of as punishment, more of as an experiment, as something interesting to see how food, my body reacts to different foods. But I check a bunch of different metrics. So for testosterone, I get my blood work done every 6 months. And then blood work.
Just go to the doctor, or how does that work?
Okay. I go to the doctor, and he does blood draws, and we do a whole entire profile pretty much every 6 months. And
How do
then
you get your doctor to agree to that?
he's very much holistic.
Okay.
He is very much of the same mindset that I am,
Hmm.
which is very fortunate. I know a lot of doctors, they're like, why do you need all of this?
Right.
But my doctor, he's an athlete. He gets the high fat, low carb diet. He's very much a proponent of that. He's an endocrinologist, and he's one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best because he's open to this high fat, low carb. He sees a lot of diabetic patients, so he's very much cutting down the sugars.
Hmm.
But he's treated a lot of patients for low testosterone, and he's very much anti drugs, especially for someone as young as me. I'm only 24, and to see someone that have low testosterone, he's like, Chris, you have the testosterone of a 84-year-old man. Let's fix this naturally. You shouldn't be put on Viagra or Axion or whatever they're giving out.
Hmm.
So that's how I get the blood. That's how I got him signed on to it. Or he got me signed on to it rather.
Hmm.
And then so I do that every 6 months, just to check, my omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratios, my thyroid function, so my T3 and T4 levels, my iron, my testosterone levels, my free testosterone levels, and then of course my cholesterol as well. And my cholesterol is actually, even though I'm consuming all this saturated fat with the coconut butter and the coconut milk and the egg and the whole eggs, my cholesterol is almost borderline low.
Hmm.
My LDH cholesterol or LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol,
Right.
that actually did not register on my last blood draw,
Okay.
because it was so low. And my HDL was perfectly fine.
Hmm.
So for all those people who say, "Oh, saturated fat's bad for you," I do not buy into that.
Hmm.
And then also other metrics that I track every week. I've got something called I have an ultrasound for body fat measurement. So I'm able to. It's made by Body Metrics, and it gives you an ultrasound on 3 different parts of your body and calculates body fat percentage on that. And then
How much does that cost? Is that something?
that I got cheap off eBay.
Uh-huh.
So usually it costs about $300. I got it for $75 off eBay, and that's the most reliable. From what I've heard, but with the exception of a DEXA scan, that's the most reliable body fat measurement
Hmm.
tool. So I do that weekly or every other week. If I miss a measurement, it doesn't really matter too much. But I try to keep, because I'm doing this high fat diet and I'm also weightlifting more. I
Hmm.
want to make sure. I want to see, am I gaining weight? Am I gaining fat? Or am I gaining muscle?
Right.
And what's going on? What's going on beneath the skin? Which is why I do it. So that's body fat, and then every morning I take my ketone levels as well as my blood glucose levels.
Okay. Yeah. So your ketone levels, how has that been going? Tell me a little bit about that. What are your levels at, and have you noticed that different foods give you different levels?
Yeah, I've my blood ketones, I've been testing consistently around the zero point 0.6 to zero point 0.7 levels.
Hmm.
And then if I have a slightly higher carb day, it will go down to about the zero point 0.4 level. And that's morning fasted. So it depends. If I have over 200 carbs a day, and that's mostly from vegetables or pumpkin, or it's not from bread. I don't eat bread.
Hmm.
But if I do have more carbs or even more protein,
Hmm.
higher protein day, my ketones will go down like zero point 0.4.
Okay.
But consistently, it's been around the zero point 0.6, zero point 0.7 level, which I think Finney and Bullock defined as moderate ketosis.
Right.
It's not the 1.0 ketone levels that most people get, and I think that's mostly because of my protein intake, because it is at 30%. I think that's what's keeping me from going to the 1.0. But that's pretty much my average ketone levels. After a workout, I've also been testing it after workouts just to see where it is and whether I've been burning ketones while I'm working out. They jump to about 1.5.
Okay. Interesting. And what kind of meter are you using for the ketone?
Precision Extra. It's
Okay.
it's the one that I got it off Jimmy Moore. Jimmy Moore recommended it. It
Right.
does blood glucose as well as ketones. And it also has it's from what I found, it has the cheapest strips, because it's not the measurer that's the expensive part. It's the strips that are the expensive part. But it's they're not as expensive as they used to be.
Hmm.
I remember when I first started testing, you could only get them by prescription from your doctor, or you had to buy them over the counter.
Uh-huh.
But now you can get them off eBay. You can get them off cheap sites. You can get them off Amazon even. So that's what I use. It's the Precision Extra, and that does both blood ketones and blood glucose.
Okay. So Chris, tell me a little bit about your training. What is that like? Has it changed at all since you've been on the lower carb diet?
At first, when I first started Go Carb, it was my off season, so I was really taking some time off. So I just pretty much was adapting to the higher fat diet. Wasn't really training that much, and then since the beginning of October, have been starting to step up the training a little bit. Typically, I train about 15 hours a week. That's going to go up to 20 starting about mid-December, and then go pretty much consistently between 20 and 25 from January all throughout next season. And typically I do, in a typical week, Monday is usually my bike training or my bike trainer day. So I'll do intervals on my bike trainer, followed by a brief 30-minute run with pickups. Mm-hmm. And then Tuesday I hop in the pool, and do a pool session that usually lasts like an hour to an hour and a half. Wednesday is my hard run day, so whether I'm on the track or doing hill repeats or doing a tempo run. Thursday I'm back in the pool for more of Tuesday's usually speed, Thursday's usually endurance. Friday is either an off day depending on how I feel, or if I'm feeling good, another swim. Saturday is my long ride day, and then Sunday is my long run day. And then I do three weightlifting sessions a week.
Okay, cool. So have you noticed, like, on your harder days, was it difficult when you first started to reach the paces that you wanted?
Yes. When I first started to go to a higher fat diet, started using UCAN, I was only able to go about 2.5 hours without fuel, and by the end of those 2.5 hours, I was dead. Like, I was not I would come home and I would be like, oh God, I'm tired. And I was going slower, and my paces weren't there, my power wasn't there, and then about 3 weeks into it, it just clicked. And I was able to start increasing my mileage, increasing my times, with no problem. The only problem I've encountered with the high-fat diet is with weightlifting. When I weightlift in the afternoon, I need to have some sort of carbohydrate beforehand, whether it's a fruit, or I've actually really like Amarita bars. They're a sponsor of mine, and I've fallen in love with them. They're all natural, all organic, all plant-based, no gluten, no dairy. Those I love having before a workout, and because they have chia seeds and fat in them, they don't spike my blood sugar like a normal Cliff Bar or Power Bar does. Mm-hmm. Usually I've tested it because I'm a geek like that. My blood glucose before is about 80. After the Amarita bar, I have the energy. I have the energy to hit it hard in the weight room. But my blood sugar is only about 95.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So Chris, you've done a lot of testing. You've done a lot of learning in the past few months. Do you have any tips for people out there who want to give this a try for the first time?
I would say my major tip is go easy at first. Do not think that you'll be able to hold the same amount of training that you did beforehand on this new diet. Really take 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off to fully adapt to it. Mm-hmm. That's my first tip. My second tip is forget the scale. And that's rich coming from me because I weigh myself daily, but forget if your goal is weight loss, do not look at the scale for, I would say, 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
Trust that the diet's going to work. A lot of people see they lose fat quickly right off the bat. And they lose 4, 5, 6, even 10 pounds in a week. And that's mostly because they're losing water weight. Carbohydrate makes you hold water. But reducing that carb makes you shed water. So, and then they plateau, and then they get frustrated, and they go back to their normal ways. So forget the scale, forget the numbers, and just roll with it. Have trust in the diet. And then if it doesn't work out for 5, 8 months, really look at your macros, really look at what you're eating. But don't give up on it. See if you can make it work. It's not for everyone, but you really do have to give it a fair shot. So that's my second piece of advice. And my third piece of advice is, treat your body as an experiment. See how it reacts. It does take time, but tweak it till it works. You don't have to go completely ketogenic for it to work. A high-fat diet, you get to see benefits of a high-fat diet and the metabolic efficiency even without going into ketosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
people get afraid and too wrapped up in, oh, I have to be in ketosis for it to work. You don't have to be in ketosis for it to work.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, Vinny Tortorich, I know John Smith says it. You do not have to be in ketosis for to see the benefits of a high-fat diet.
Right. Well, that's awesome advice, Chris. And I hope people that are curious about it maybe try it out, because the advantages of not having to take all the goos and gels out on your rides or runs is just huge. I mean, for me, that's been one of the big factors.
And also, like, one other piece of advice is it's eye-opening once you start to see where all the hidden sugar and the hidden carbohydrates are.
Mm-hmm.
When people first switch to Atkins, they go, a lot on the deli meats and a lot on, like, the processed meats and everything. And that's all right until you look at the label and see that the second ingredient on that piece of beef jerky and on that ham that you got from the gas station or from the grocery store or from Oscar Mayer, the second ingredient's sugar. So
Right.
you got to be careful. But yeah, not having to consume goos on long rides or runs and be able to actually get faster as you go, like as you do more, is one of the biggest benefits.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, what do you have coming up for races?
I'm taking next year. In January, I've got the PF Chang's Rock and Roll Half in January. December, I've got the March, I've got the Phoenix Marathon. And then I've got my two big races next year are going to be Eagleman 70.3 in June, and then Ironman Boulder in August. And if the stars align and I play my cards right and I don't do anything stupid, hopefully, fingers crossed, I might be able to get a Kona slot. But who knows? I'm aging up in age group, so it's going to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really going to have to work hard at it. But that's the goal.
Awesome. Well, good luck in those races. And Chris, it's been great talking with you. Everyone, check out his blog, triathlonbuddha.blogspot.com. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Chris. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Aaron, and thank you for putting on a great show. I'm just starting to catch up on the back episodes. I've been following your blog for a while, but I'm just starting to get into the podcast too. They're definitely a help on the long rides.
You've been listening to another Paleo Runner podcast. If you like podcasts, you're also going to like Audible.com. Audible has over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Kindle, Android, or MP3 player. If you'd like to get a free audiobook download, go to audibletrial.com/paleorunner or click on the link displayed on the app right now. Thanks for listening.